I'm Nigel Metz. We're here in Lucky Bay Brewing. Robert and Cale and myself, we founded this brewery just before 2015. And we make beer here, not just from malted barley as per normal, but also barley straight from the farm, which is a little bit unique. I mean, one of the things about going to that malt factory is when you go there and you'll see hundreds of tons of grain being steeped in these giant tanks, and then they'll let it grow for about a week, and they've got air coming through it because obviously as things grow it generates heat, but they want to keep it nice and cool. And then they'll use a heap of gas to dry that out. And one of the things that really is apparent in that process is the amount of water and energy you do use. By using the unmalted barley that's only 50 k's up the road, and basically I go and collect in with a trailer myself, that sort of carbon footprint of the process is dramatically reduced. So it's the provenance thing, but also, you're using much, much less water and energy. And I mean, if we now to roll forward, say 20 years and think about, well, if that energy and water is more and more expensive, where's that going to leave us for raw material? So that's why we're really interested in this as an idea. When we talk about enzyme brewing, that's what sort of drew us to it. The process of making beer is essentially we extract carbohydrates from grain and we break them down into sugars and we feed them to yeast. So in the malting factory, when you soak that grain in the water, you're imbibing the grain that's starting to grow. So very hipster, you're making sprouts. You're activating it. Funnily enough, the brewing industry has been doing it for ages. And then after about day 7, when it's got a little shoot on it, or day 5, whereabouts, depending on which factory you're in and the grain, it'll have a little shoot on it, and they'll tumble that grain to dry it, and they'll knock that little shoot off, and you've got this sort of half germinated grain that's then been dried right down. What's happened during that process is you haven't just germinated it, the natural enzymes in the grain have fired up, and they've started to burn holes in the little starch granules. So when you crack open that grain and soak it in hot water, those starch granules burst open and break down into sugar. So that's when we talk about enzyme brewing, is we have to add a little bit of enzymes to sort of help that process. And because we're not using a barley that's been to a malt factory, we need to help it out a little bit. Energy is one of those costs that does eat you as you go along. I mean, you've got a cool room running now, keeping beer cold, and when you're making beer, you've got water heating and boiling of beer and those sorts of things. For us, we've got a fairly small solar system, so we'll be looking more solar. And what's really interesting to see is I've been speaking to some businesses in Perth that are going across to solar, and traditionally they were going, no, you fire with gas. But now it's going back to electricity because no, you can reduce your electricity bill by putting in solar. So it's actually really good because it's becoming more of a closed loop on your energy. Obviously the rainwater is important to us. If you capture that on site and you don't have to transport it, and it's of a great quality, so there's no treatment required. So we're making some improvements there. We will increase our tank space slightly. And also we're going to work more on that cellar door front because, as I was talking about before, having that beer consumed right there is, it's a very local sort of short production to end finish sort of cycle, and that's a really nice thing for us, and it enables you to be profitable while being small. Anybody that's been to Esperance will know that the water here is not great when you have a shower. It's very hard water, and that's because it's coming out of the ground. It's high calcium water. So we were at no stage ever going to use that water for our beer. So we do use all rainwater that comes from the roof. That was probably our key consideration. We need to be able to catch water and make sure we use that water, because essentially it's a great product that comes straight out of the sky, and it's a product we take a little bit for granted in Australia, whereas the Europeans that come here and go, oh my goodness, we would never use rainwater because it's too polluted. But we're technically right up against that Southern Ocean, some of the most isolated spot on the planet, and the water is just great. In terms of packaging, that is a dilemma that I think we'll face more in the future as we look to package more. I mean, a keg is a wonderful package because it's stainless steel, it's clean, it's reused, it's very sustainable. You use it hundreds of times and away you go, and then you use it into a glass and you wash the glass and away you go again. Whereas as soon as you put it into a can or a bottle, it is a single-use container, and that's something that doesn't sit well with us, but it's something of the reality of the product. So they're the sort of things we're thinking about, and it is probably something we've got to face as a whole sort of an economy is, okay, we're still going to want things in our economy, drive motor cars and those sorts of things, but how do we start to minimise that impact and get maximum value out of what we do have? So one of the key ways we involve the community is essentially by using the local grain, and the support that is reciprocated from the farming community is tremendous, and everything about our brand is something that's unique to us and specific to our region, and I think that's really great for us as people who live here to have a bit of pride in our region, and also put it on show a little bit. If you're about to drink a beer that's made by a craft brewery locally, The money that flows, say, from that pint of beer across the bar and then back down the supply chain is employing people in that community, and the transport workers and the people that grew the grain, the people that package the beer, all those things are local. The trend in Australia is going away from volume to quality, and that really plays well to us as a craft producer, because obviously our costs of production are much higher. I mean, tenfolds of more than that of the really big breweries, and that's a really nice thing that people are actually starting to support us in that too. We still make all this by hand. You know, we're still a small business, even though we're one of the larger players, and it's great to see that independent breweries still sort of hold that proud.